So we have now another installment in our series on keeping the faith. Talks by young people about how they stay connected to church even after they've graduated from high school, youth ministry programs in high school, to bigger and better things, but how they keep faith as a very important part of their lives. So we have two speakers today, and they actually are happily married and expecting a child, so we're very happy to have them help us out. Please.
Hi. So what I'm going to do is give you guys a rundown of my background and faith journey, and then move on to what motivates me to keep coming to church. I grew up in a very average Catholic family. We mostly went to church every weekend. We weren't perfect, but we did our best. I went to Catholic school right over here at Holy Rosary. I got my sacraments right in this church. And then I got to high school. I went to Scranton. I was very involved with youth group here, so that obviously helped to keep me coming to church, or at least very involved. But as I got older, right in those high school years, I started to have questions about church. What does this mean? Am I only coming here because this is what my parents want? What do I actually believe? And I realize now that I could have talked to Father Edwards about this, I could have talked to my parents about it, but it was kind of scary for me because I was a good kid and I didn't think good kids were supposed to have questions like that. But it was normal and I believe healthy in a way. But I struggled with that for a while. So a turning point for me was I had a friend in high school who was Greek Orthodox, and I ended up going to a prayer service with him and his family. I didn't understand much since most of it was in a different language, but the whole time I looked around at everyone there and their traditions. The way they genuflected was different, the way they blessed themselves and prayed, but it was so beautiful. I was a little in awe, and then it hit me. I have that. I have my own traditions right here. So in that moment, I decided that I would go to Mass every week with the spirit of keeping these traditions alive in me, and eventually I would get the answers to my questions. So for a little while, I came to church by myself. I went at a different time than my parents because I needed it to be my choice. I needed it to be separate from them. And eventually those answers came. Maybe not all my questions were answered, but I got enough to figure out what going to church means to me. And I'm not sure if I could explain that to you, and I'm sure the answers are going to be different for every person, but what I can say is sometimes our faith journey can take some patience, but it's worth it. So staying motivated to keep me coming to church can be different, especially when we have close friends or family members who don't take it as seriously. But I have one thing that keeps me motivated, and that's people. So I'll share two quick examples of what I mean. When I started college as a freshman, I worked part-time at the library, and there was a senior who worked the same shift as me. She was beautiful inside and out. She was just the kind of person you wanted to be friends with, the kind of person you were drawn to. So as we started talking more, I found out that she was a theology major. And, we got to talking. I asked her why, and she said it was because the church had given her so much, and that was her way of giving back. She was so passionate about her faith. It was incredible, and it sparked something in me that renewed my faith, and I wanted in some way to be like her and keep going to church. So fast forward a few years, I was working in an office with coworkers around my age, so we were pretty close, and we were talking about something or other when the subject of religion came up, and they were all kind of poking fun at it, but so I said something like, well, I'm Catholic and I go to Mass pretty regularly, and they kind of just changed the subject and moved on. And one of the younger kids that was working there, he was probably about 19. He came up to me afterwards and he said, I think it's so cool that you're Catholic. And I thought he was kind of making fun of me from the previous conversation, so I was like, oh, okay, moved on. But he was like, no, really, I think it's so cool that you're Catholic. And he said, I wish I could be Catholic. And I said, well, why can't you? And he said, well, I'm Presbyterian and I love going to church with my family every Sunday, so I won't give that up. And I said, well, that's probably one of the best reasons I've ever heard. So my point is, people inspire me every day, and you never know when you're going to inspire somebody else. So what keeps me motivated is seeing God's love in other people and hoping that they can see that love in me. Thank you.
Hi, kids. My name's Jordan Leonard. I'm Brooke's husband. I'm probably a little bit older than most of the people who have been speaking to you about how to keep the faith alive in your teens and maybe early 20s. But a little bit about myself. I grew up in Scranton. I grew up in the Plot, which is Greenridge or North Scranton, depending on who you ask. I grew up, it was pretty normal, I guess, but as I started to grow up, a lot of the people that I grew up with, almost everybody was raised Catholic, stopped going to church, probably stopped going to CCD classes. Most of us probably went to public school. But I didn't. I continue to go to church every Sunday, and although it's probably a difficult question to ask and answer as to why would I keep going to church when everybody else stopped, and when I was a young teenager and a mid-aged teenager. I think that the only way that I'd be able to answer that is because I knew that it was important. I didn't know exactly what was important about it, but I knew that the lessons that were taught in church and the values that were taught by the Catholic Church were important, even if I didn't quite understand exactly what was important about it. I continued to go through high school. I continued to go to church. I decided to attend the University of Scranton, a Catholic university. That was probably one of the better decisions that I made growing up, because it gave me the opportunity to reflect on some of the theology and some of the philosophy of the Catholic Church. And a lot of people, especially growing up, when you hear about theology or philosophy, it's kind of head in the clouds type stuff. When you think about philosophy, you don't really think about a degree that's going to give you the skills to learn or to get a job that pays a lot of money. A lot of people think it's a waste of time. I happen to disagree. And as I began to go through and learn and to ask these serious questions, why do we do this? Why does the church do this? It started to dawn on me. Why we do some of these things in the Catholic Church and why we are taught some of these things in the Catholic Church are very important in your everyday lives. If you usually ask yourself why I do something, you could usually try to find a way to do that thing better. And after I graduated from college, I was a Marine officer, and every day, multiple times a day, I was faced with serious questions, sometimes really important questions. These are questions that really affect people. And everything I did, I had to fall back. What's the real problem here, and how do I fix it? I'll say probably almost every time I fell back on my faith. What I learned as a young teenager and an early teenager in church, what I learned in my philosophy and theology classes at the University of Scranton, and the decisions that I made weren't always perfect, but the decisions that I made were always well thought out, and they were always made from the human perspective. After I got out of the Marine Corps, after I did my active duty time, I went to law school. And in law school, it wasn't all that much different. The law is really based on a lot of philosophy. And I fell back on, what I learned at the University of Scranton, why things are done a certain way, and why we do things a certain way that were thought out by a lot of people that were a lot smarter than me. And that's why we've been doing them for, in American history for over 200 years, and in the history of the Catholic Church for over 2,000 years. So what it comes down to me is why going to church is important, is because it helps you live a good life. I see a lot of people that start coming to church in their 50s, in their 60s, in their 70s, and I think that that's because they're trying to prepare for the next step, the afterlife. But there's a little bit more to the Catholic Church, I think, and that's how to live a good life for the entirety of it. And I think that that's why it's important to continue to go to church and try to learn about your faith, because if you apply it, it will help you, whether that's in your professional life or your personal life. It's important. So thank you very much. Have a good Sunday.